process in ITSM's, suit. So when we say ITSM, right, we talked about incident process, we talked about problem process, and we also talked about, the other aligned processes. So change is one important process which, very heavily resulted from the problem or from the major incidents, or it can be a planned activity as well as part of our release process. Okay. So if you look into the change process, the change can trigger from your incident caused by or major incident, probably leading to the change execution and problem. When we implemented a problem as part of your RCA, you have come down to a resolution stating that your device need to be upgraded, then it will be treated as a change. Okay. As part of your release management, you will have set of activities lined up to deliver as part of your release process. Okay. Standard changes that you talked about, pre-approved changes. If you are executing any change on regular basis which has no impact and already proven track record, so we will be using that as a standard change, a pre-approved change. And whenever we executed a change, so what happens is which will be impacting a CI configuration item, which means like, let us say we are bringing, one example here. Okay, some of the servers in your environment are performing very slow and we created a problem record. So as part of your problem diagnosis, what we realized is those servers are not performing well, okay, up to the mark. Reason could be the RAM or hard disk need to be upgraded. So when you implemented a change, what is happening? You are you are enhancing the RAM or hard disk. So which means you are updating the CI. Okay. And change definitely like, leads to updates to the knowledge records. So whenever we made a new change, so the related knowledge need to be updated in the knowledge management. That is how the change will be interlocked with various other processes in the environment. Okay. And coming to change versus release. So release, will talk primarily about, if you, for example, a new release has come up, it may comprises multiple changes within it. Okay, so it could be one change or it could be multiple change, but the warners in reality from the governance standpoint, like, both change and release will be taken care primarily by the change advisory board. Okay, the change management team. Okay, so the release could be, primarily it may include changes to the existing infrastructure or probably we are building a new infrastructure. In that context, like, we probably have one or multiple changes. So a change can be, which we are modifying to the already set, already enabled services. For example, you have implemented, okay, one infrastructure element. For example, let us say you implemented a monitoring tool in the environment and you are trying to change it. So that is treated as a change. But for example, if I want to implement the end-to-end, IT infrastructure, it comprises of monitoring tool, it comprises of storage devices and then other devices. Then, you will be releasing them phase by phase. In the phase one, you probably will have some services, and the phase two, you probably will have additional services. So that can be treated as a release. A change, okay, is an, primarily modification to the existing service, and release cannot be always like to the existing service or also can be at a new service. Okay. Now, the key features on the change process is like, we will be talking about the various change models. Okay, we'll talk about normal change, emergency change, and standard change. Okay, and workflows in the background, and then various state transitions. Okay, and we talked about standard change. This is also one part of it. And the key parameters which we will be talking on the change screen is like, primarily on the risk aspect. Okay, and of course the change advisory board, is enabled with a new change advisory, board workbench. We'll talk about it, and backout and maintenance schedules, and the change is, primarily integrated with other schedules like discovery and then software asset management integrations. Okay, because if you make a change, so immediately we may need to trigger a discovery to ensure like the CMDB is properly updated. Okay. And then typical change life cycle goes from creation, and then this goes through the assessment and followed by authorization, and wherein you will be receiving the approvals, then it will be scheduled and moves to the implementation followed by closure. Okay, that is the change life cycle. And we'll talk about these screens, and as we talked about, the sources of the change can be problem, incident, or a configuration catalog, or a manual creation. Okay, and so these are some of the key things that we need to understand, particularly from the change context. Okay, so let's step on to the tool and then see how we'll create a change. As we spoke about, what are all these key features that within the service now, how they are structured. So we will learn those elements. Okay, go to ServiceNow tool. Yeah. So as we say, the change can be created from various sources. That is one of the key features that you need to understand. For example, go to open incident, go to problem, okay, and I'm opening an incident. I'm opening a problem, and also directly you also can create a change from change management tool, a manual creation. So here, if you open incident, on the incident section, if you go to related records, okay, under related records, you have a placeholder to relate incident record with change record. At this stage, either you can relate the existing change. If you have, you can relate it, or you can create, which means an incident can be a trigger point for your change. An incident can also trigger a change. Similarly, the problem, same way, from the problem record, you can either record it reported by a change record directly from here, okay, or else you can create a new change. So similarly, here also you have a placeholder. You can create a new change, or you can add multiple changes which are impacted by this problem. Okay. So sometimes if you are implementing a problem, okay, you probably have come across to the situation, the workaround or root cause analysis or the recommendations state that you have to implement a change on the application database and then also at network level. So then you will be creating multiple changes. Okay. Wherein you will be able to associate all those changes in this particular one. That is why you have add feature. Okay. So likewise, and the change also can be created from this placeholder. If you create a change, okay, the system says, create a new change, wherein this will ask you various state models. Okay, what kind of a change that you are trying to create? Okay, what kind of a change that you are trying to create? So is it an emergency change, or a normal change, or pre-approved change? So these are the pre-approved changes. So this is what the service now is saying here. Okay, in this one, this is a change models. We talked about change models, right? So these are the various change models which we have. And out of that, you also have the standard catalogs or a pre-approved changes, which will help you to manage your change quite quickly. Okay, so let's create one normal change. Okay, when it comes to the normal change, which means which follow all the required steps. If it is an emergency, you may need to expedite a bit, so probably you will skip some of the approvals. Okay, it all depends on how we have configured these process engine in the background, whatever the way we configured the change flow, according to that it will be acting on. So now I'm creating a standard change. Okay, the standard change is, okay, let's say first standard, first normal change. This is a normal change, right? Normal change. Normal change. Creating it. Now save the record. So when we are creating a change, that will be in the initially in new status. Okay, it will be in the new status. When to progress to the next layers, so the change will recommend to make sure you have a proper planning attached to the change management. Okay, why we are justification? Why are we creating this change? Why are we executing this change need to be documented here. Implementation plan. Step 1, step 2, you need to attach all that. And then risk analysis. Okay, if there is any risk, attach that risk. If it is not applicable. Okay, and then back out plan. So how do you back out it? So you will have to remove step 2 and then step 1. So that's how you will be backing out. Test plans. Test case 1, test case 2. So these are the test plans. So you have to attach all that, and also you need to make sure when exactly you are implementing this change. What is the time period that you want to implement this change? I want to implement this change today night at 9 p.m. Okay, I want to execute this change at today night at 9 p.m. I want to state that. Okay, so this is my change window. This is called change window. Does this change require cab approval? Then we will mention this cab. So if you say that, this will go through the change advisory board, okay, decision. This go through the change advisory board decision making. Okay, and then after this, okay, after this will go through the cab and they will approve and they will include their recommendations. But now we are in the initial creation phase. Let's see how it works. Now, at this stage, at the same time, is there any other change that is being applied to this configuration item? Please remember this configuration item is very key from the change management point of view. Now, I am creating a change, okay, for this particular one, ANI IBM. Okay, this is my configuration item record. So I am trying to create. So the system will check if there are any conflicts for this particular change at that point in time. For the same, for this particular configuration item, at this particular schedule, are there any schedules? Okay, are there any conflicts? The system will say the conflict check is complete. And if there is any conflict, yeah, it is saying there is a conflict. What is that conflict? So there is another change in which is scheduled around the same time. That is why this is saying there is a conflict. Okay, so that's what you can do. And then notes, you can add notes, whatever you want. During the closure, you will do this. Okay, now most important thing that you have updated the risk plan and then planning status and then also the schedules. And then other important thing is who will be owning this particular change. Okay, who is the person? So you can say there is a group called change management and then you assign this to change coordinator or a change manager who will be owning this particular change. Now change is properly created. You can see this is entirely different from incident problem. The execution process is entirely different from the other processes. Okay. So now this is how you will create a change. Once the change is created, what you do is you will send it for assessment. You will push this particular change for assessment. Okay. Try to progress this for approval process. Now the change will go to approvals. Okay. So the change will be going to assessment approval. If there are any approvals attached, then this will go to the approver. Otherwise, it will be skipping. It all depends on how your system is configured. Now the system is in the assessment phase. Okay, and should be waiting for approval. Okay, in the assessment phase and the change is waiting for approval. If you scroll down, okay, and this is going for change manager approval. Okay, because right now this is going for this team to assess it and then approve it. Okay, this manager, who is this particular person? Change manager. Now go to duplicate. Okay, now change manager should be opening up that change and then approve it. Being I'm an administrator, I can right click and then approve it. Okay, but in reality, what happens? The change manager will be doing this. Let me impersonate as a change manager here. Okay, I'm impersonating as a change manager. So it all depends on how the change manager is practicing it. Now the change manager will be having this logging into his system and go to this particular, okay, and type approval. Okay, and you can say that you can go to my approvals. Now there is one record 3001 is created, right? This is waiting for his approval. You can see this is waiting for his approval. He will open like this from the approval window. Yeah, he has opened it up and then say that I am approving. I'm approving this change. So now he approved it. Okay, he approved it. If this is approved, now the change will be moving to the next stage. Okay, he approved it. Okay, let's have this saved. Yeah, this is successfully approved. Now unimpersonate and the impersonation. So now I'll be working as an administrator and you can see the change has been approved. Okay, it went to okay, you can see the change has been approved and moved to authorization phase. Okay, and the change is approved by the change manager and moved to authorization phase. Okay, who is going to be authorizing? Now you can see this went to CAB approval because okay, this is the another step in my thing. And then also we would like to add it to the CAB required. Okay, so now the CAB team will be coming and then they will be approving it. For example, let us say there is a person, a Bernard or a Ron. Okay, they will be logging into the system same way like we did it, and they will go to the approval and then they will approve it. And also what they do is okay, they have updated on this particular one on this day, and CAB also include some recommendations. Okay, this is a critical change. Please send out okay communication at the end of change implementation for our internal validation. So they are saying this, and they will save it. They will provide those recommendations for you to review, and then they will approve this. Okay, they will approve this record. Ron will be approving it. Okay, so right now, as I said, I'm the administrator. I have the ability to approve anybody's behalf of, so I'm approving it on his behalf of. So once this is authorized, now the change has all the required approvals in place. Okay, it is scheduled. So the next phase is the change need to be implemented according to the change window. You have to wait until this time comes up and then you have to implement it. So now what you do is as part of your schedule, and then the next phase is you will have to implement it. Okay, when you say implement, the system will be automatically going to create some tasks to complete. It's all up to your independent, your customer requirement, how many tasks need to be created, what should be the task sequence, okay, how we need to handle this task process, all that can be handled here. Now, when I clicked on implement, the system created two default tasks. One is an implementation task and then other one is okay, testing task. So what I'll do, I will go and make sure I am implementing it. Okay, all completed. It is saying okay, successfully implemented. Okay, and close it. But in reality, you will be providing an assignment group and then assign to who will be completing it. So the next one. Okay, so we are good with this one. Provide the closure information, successful, test, and then provide the assignment group details and close it. So now both the changes were completed for 3001. So you can see the change has been successfully implemented. All the tasks are completed automatically. Progress to review phase. Now at this phase, you can see there is a planned start date and planned end date. This is what we initially planned out. And then you can see this is what the actual start date and actual end date, they were automatically captured, which means though you have scheduled it at 21, at 26. This is what like your plan started and plan ended. But in reality, we have implemented between these timelines. So the change manager now he will come and review, and then he will say that like yeah, successfully implemented, and he will say the review is successful, and then he will move to close and update it. Okay, so with this one, the change life cycle is completed end to end. Okay, now if you open reload this particular screen, okay, the change is moved from new to closed successfully, okay, by following all the required steps. Okay, this is how the change process will work. When you compare with this change process, now the other change model that we have is normal, and then also we have an emergency, right? Okay, if you look into the emergency in comparison with this one, if you look into this normal, it has followed all the required steps. Okay, now go to this emergency change. Okay, test emergency change. Okay, and include all the details. Okay, and then also provide the date. Okay, and save it. So now this is for new, and then send it for request for approval. Okay, this is a mandatory to progress to assessment. Okay, now if I have moved this to approval process, earlier it has been successfully went to assessment, and from assessment it went to authorization. From authorization it moved to schedule, and then it followed these subsequent steps. If you can now look into this in the emergency case, this has jumped from assessment. Okay, there is no assessment phase. It directly moved to authorization, directly went out for CAB approval. You can see it went out for CAB approval because this is in nature, this is an emergency. We don't want to waste the time. So that is why we are skipping some of the approvals and moving into the next phase directly. So that is the difference between normal and emergency. Is this clear, Hemant?
Yes, Srikanth. I'm clear.
Chaitanya? Are you clear, Chaitanya? Hi, Rani. Yeah,
Hi, sir.
joined a
Sorry,
little
sir.
late.
I was stuck. I was in the other meeting, so I actually forgot about the session. So as soon as
Yeah, we just talked, started talking about, the change processes.
yes,
So
sir.
we are talking about, we talked about normal in the beginning, and now we talked about emergency. I'm explaining the difference between normal and emergency. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So this is how the normal change is different from emergency change. Okay. And the next change we have in the system is, okay, pre-approved change. Okay, let's say this is a standard change. I want to reboot a Windows server every weekend. I created a standard template, and now we will be using the standard change. Now you compare it with other change processes. If you click on normal change, sorry, pre-approved change, you can see the short description, and then the planning details. All of them were already pre-populated. I have not provided anything because every week, like we are doing this change. So that is why we have this standard changes created, and then it was a pre-approved. Okay, we will talk about it like as an administrator. How do you do this? Okay, now how this particular standard change behaves. Now you save this. Okay, and now after saving this particular standard change, okay, you can see there is no approval process. Directly, this is going to schedule. Okay, directly this is progressing to schedule phase. Earlier, the normal has followed all the steps, and emergency skipped assessment. Now standard one skipped assessment as well as authorization. It directly jumped onto the schedule. Okay, so if you implement it, the same set of tasks will be created and you will be implementing it. So that is the difference between normal, emergency, and standard. Now you looked into these standard changes, right? So standard changes are pre-approved changes. Okay, let us say I want to create one more standard change, and then see we will receive one-time approval, and next time onwards, you can directly jump these approvals if you are creating. Okay, so now this is what the standard change, rebooting Windows Server. Okay, let us say I want to create another standard change. Okay, called reboot monitoring server. Okay, this is the new standard change that I want to create. How do you do that? So this is purely an administrative task. You as an administrator, you will create these standard changes and you will maintain it in the system, and they will be available for end users to create it. Now you can see there is a standard changes. Okay. And here you will come to my proposals. You can propose a standard change. You can say, I want to create new standard change. Okay. The new standard change is reboot monitoring server. This is what I want to create. And the description of this is a pre-approved change. Business justification to enhance the system performance. Okay. And values. So this is where like I'm going to give some values. I'm giving short description. Okay. Test standard change description. Test standard monitoring server reporting. Okay. Implementation plan. You can provide anything you want. Backout plan, test plan. Okay. And then also assignment group, I will be directly providing here only. So you can see how that will be working. Assignment group. Every standard change directly should be assigned to change management group. And then assignee. The name assigned to, is it already there on top? Yeah, here you have change management team. Change manager. Okay, I'm providing it. Okay, fine. And then is there any critical information that I want to include? So for okay, planning details we provided. Schedule we will be providing. Conflicts notes. Okay, and then description we provided. Short description we provided. Anything else if you want to provide, we can add those fields and then prepare a template. Okay, now all of them are in place. Saving it. Now this is my proposal for a new standard change to be available under this section. Okay, if I open up this particular one under this pre-approved, I want my reboot monitoring server. All I need is reboot monitoring server. This is what I wanted. So I have proposed it. Okay, now I have new one. And then what I'm saying for one-time approval, I'm asking for one-time approval. This is a server standard. Okay, standard changes. Justification, risk and impact analysis are important. Justification, okay. Test. Done. I saved all the required fields. Save it. And now the change is getting saved. Okay. Once this is done, now you can see this is went out for approval, and the change manager will be providing one-time approval. Now the change manager is approved. Okay. You can see now the change is all in place. The change manager approved. Now you go to your model and refresh here. Your reboot one should come here. Okay, if I refresh it, you can see report monitoring server. Yeah, here you have. If I'm creating a new change using this one, all the details that I provided there as part of my proposal have already come up here, and this is already approved by the change management as a one-time approval, and you don't have to wait for any new approval. You can directly save and go to schedule. You can save this and then add assignment group assignee. Okay, add assignee and directly you can go to schedule. So you used your pre-approved standard change template, which populated all the details that you have provided there automatically, and you are able to do that. This is purely an administrative task. And you as an administrator, what else you will be doing? You will be working on the priority piece, and then also you will be working on how this risk need to be calculated. Okay, what are all the various ways to calculate this risk? You know, for calculating risk, we have here in the CAP process. So we have risk calculation procedures. Okay, so you type risk. Okay, so you can see the under the change, under the administration, you have risk conditions. So whatever the risk condition that you have provided, so they will be automatically coming up. For example, tomorrow you want to say if the change is coming up with a critical business service, okay, then the change should be always like, you know, treated as a high risk. How this risk condition need to be defined? You can define it here. Let us say critical service change. Example. Now, if I have included any service which is critical service, then the change will become critical. So the conditions, whatever like, you know, you are trying to put in, so you will be placing here. Okay, all the conditions will be configured in this place. If the business service criticality is 1, then set the current impact is equal to 1, and then current value is equal to 1. You are actually including the condition, and then you are including the value. This is also an administrative activity, though you are seeing like some of the syntaxes which are very common. And then also there are some companies, they will follow the risk calculation should happen. Is it directly at the time of saving via business rule, or you want to have a UI action to calculate the risk? So when I said UI action to calculate a risk, so here you will have a link to calculate risk. Okay, you can see there is a calculate risk. So do you want to use the calculate risk, or you want to automatically calculate it? So you will be setting these properties. So these are some of the, I mean, there are a lot to touch upon on the change management implementation, but these are some of the quite common configurations that you will do around the risk and priority and the impact, and then also around the approvers who should be, who should be receiving the approval and who should be approving at what stage you want to approve, and then what should be the status life cycle. If you want to make any changes to the status life cycle, we will be doing it. And also the changes on the form might come up to make some fields are mandatory, some fields are like, optional. There are some companies, they will ask like, to create new fields to capture the business units. Some companies, they will say, now I have a configuration item. Okay, if the configuration item is not updated, then, I want to create another task for the inventory management team. Inventory management team should see that like, why this change is executed without a configuration item attached. And if there is no configuration item attached, then what should be the process? Should I create a task or should I send an email? What should be the process to make sure all the CIs in the CMDB are, up to the mark? So this is where like, the change is tightly integrated with the CMDB process. Okay. So any questions so far? About the change process, how the change will be created and what are the various steps in the change process? What is the difference between normal change and then emergency change? Also with the standard change, how the standard change templates can be created. Any questions on this?
No, sir, it's particular.
No, it's clear.
Okay.